Question 1. Market research demonstrates a growing interest among Latvian residents in obtaining firearms for sport shooting. An individual, Mr. Zīdiņš, who holds a valid Latvian hunting license, believes this license should suffice for him to acquire a firearm for his new sport shooting hobby. He has heard that some individuals have obtained permits quickly by knowing the right people, is considering approaching a friend who works in a local municipality office to see if they can expedite his application, and he is also contemplating submitting a medical certificate from a general practitioner he knows, rather than undergoing a specialized examination. Which of the following approaches best represents the legally compliant and ethically sound method for Mr. Zīdiņš to pursue a firearm permit for sport shooting in Latvia? Option A. Mr. Zīdiņš should meticulously gather all required documentation as stipulated by Latvian law for a firearm permit application, including a medical certificate from a qualified medical professional confirming fitness to possess a firearm, a certificate of no criminal record, and proof of completion of a firearm safety course, and submit this through the official application channels. Option B. Mr. Zīdiņš should focus on finding individuals who can expedite his application through unofficial means and submit a medical certificate from a general practitioner he knows, as this is a common practice. Option C. Mr. Zīdiņš should leverage his municipal contact to expedite the application process and submit a medical certificate from his general practitioner without further specialized assessment. Option D. Mr. Zīdiņš should rely on his existing hunting license, assuming it covers all firearm acquisition needs, and inform the authorities of his new sport shooting interest. Correct answer is A. Mr. Zīdiņš should meticulously gather all required documentation as stipulated by Latvian law for a firearm permit application, including a medical certificate from a qualified medical professional confirming fitness to possess a firearm, a certificate of no criminal record, and proof of completion of a firearm safety course, and submit this through the official application channels. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an individual to navigate the complex and specific requirements for obtaining a firearm permit in Latvia, balancing personal needs with strict legal obligations. Misinterpreting or neglecting any part of the process can lead to legal repercussions, including denial of the permit or even criminal charges. The onus is on the applicant to demonstrate they meet all criteria, and the authorities have a duty to ensure public safety. Careful judgment is required to ensure all documentation is accurate, complete, and submitted within the prescribed timelines. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves meticulously gathering all required documentation as stipulated by Latvian law for a firearm permit application. This includes obtaining a medical certificate confirming fitness to possess a firearm, a certificate of no criminal record, and proof of completion of a firearm safety course. Furthermore, it necessitates understanding and adhering to the specific grounds for permit issuance and denial as outlined in the relevant Latvian legislation, such as the law on the circulation of weapons. This approach ensures compliance with all legal prerequisites, demonstrating to the authorities that the applicant is a responsible and law-abiding individual meeting all safety and competency standards. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to assume that a valid hunting license automatically grants eligibility for a firearm permit without undergoing the separate application process and fulfilling all specific requirements for firearm possession. Latvian law clearly distinguishes between permits for hunting and permits for general firearm possession, each with its own set of criteria and application procedures. Relying solely on a hunting license without the proper firearm permit is a violation of the law. Another incorrect approach is to submit incomplete or inaccurate documentation, such as a medical certificate from an unqualified practitioner or a criminal record that has not been fully disclosed. This demonstrates a lack of diligence and potentially an attempt to mislead the authorities, which can lead to immediate denial of the permit and potential future disqualification. The law requires full transparency and accurate representation of one's background and health status. A third incorrect approach is to attempt to expedite the process by offering unofficial incentives or attempting to bypass standard procedures. This is not only unethical but also illegal in Latvia and can result in severe penalties, including criminal prosecution for bribery and the permanent denial of any future firearm permits. The application process is designed to be thorough and impartial, and any deviation from it undermines the integrity of the system. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situations should adopt a systematic and compliant approach. This involves 1. Thoroughly researching and understanding the specific legal requirements for firearm permits in Latvia, consulting official government sources and legal counsel if necessary. 2. Meticulously preparing all required documentation, ensuring accuracy, completeness, and adherence to any specified formats or timelines. 3. Submitting the application through the designated official channels and cooperating fully with any requests for further information or clarification from the authorities. 4. Maintaining ethical conduct throughout the process, avoiding any actions that could be construed as attempting to circumvent legal requirements or influence decisions improperly. Question 2. The performance metrics show a significant increase in the backlog of firearm permit applications in Latvia. As a supervisor overseeing the permit issuance process, what is the most appropriate course of action to address this backlog while upholding the stringent requirements of Latvian law? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive review of the current application processing procedures to identify and rectify any inefficiencies, while simultaneously reinforcing the mandatory adherence to all medical, psychological, and background check requirements, as stipulated by the law on the circulation of weapons and ammunition of Latvia. Option B. Propose a complete overhaul of the application system to a fully digital platform, assuming this will inherently solve the backlog without a detailed analysis of current procedural issues or the security implications under Latvian law. Option C. Immediately implement a policy to expedite the processing of all pending applications by reducing the depth of the mandatory background checks to clear the backlog more quickly. Option D. Hire additional temporary staff to process applications without first assessing the existing procedural bottlenecks or providing them with specific training on Latvian firearm permit regulations. Correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive review of the current application processing procedures to identify and rectify any inefficiencies, while simultaneously reinforcing the mandatory adherence to all medical, psychological, and background check requirements, as stipulated by the law on the circulation of weapons and ammunition of Latvia. Explanation. The performance metrics show a concerning trend in the processing times for firearm permit applications in Latvia. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the need for efficient service delivery with the absolute priority of ensuring public safety and adherence to strict legal requirements for firearm ownership. A delay in processing could lead to frustration for law-abiding citizens, but an improperly processed permit could have severe public safety consequences. Careful judgment is required to identify the root cause of the delays and implement effective solutions without compromising the integrity of the permit issuance process. The best approach involves a thorough review of the existing application process to identify bottlenecks and areas for improvement, while simultaneously reinforcing the importance of strict adherence to the requirements outlined in the law on the circulation of weapons and ammunition of Latvia. This includes ensuring that all applicants undergo the mandatory medical examinations, psychological assessments, and background checks as stipulated by the law. Furthermore, it necessitates ongoing training for personnel involved in the application process to ensure they are fully conversant with the latest legal provisions and procedural guidelines. This proactive and compliant approach ensures that efficiency gains do not come at the expense of public safety or legal integrity. An incorrect approach would be to expedite the process by reducing the thoroughness of background checks or medical evaluations. This directly violates the spirit and letter of the law on the circulation of weapons and ammunition, which mandates these checks to prevent firearms from falling into the hands of individuals who pose a risk to themselves or others. Another incorrect approach would be to focus solely on increasing staff numbers without addressing potential procedural inefficiencies or providing adequate training. While more staff might seem like a solution, could lead to inconsistent application of the law and potentially more errors if the underlying processes are flawed. Finally, implementing a purely digital system without ensuring robust security measures and verification protocols would also be a failure, as it could compromise the integrity of applicant data and the overall permit issuance process, potentially contravening data protection regulations and the security requirements inherent in firearm licensing. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance and public safety above all else. This involves a systematic analysis of the problem, considering potential solutions, and evaluating each solution against the relevant legal framework, specifically the law on the circulation of weapons and ammunition of Latvia, and ethical considerations. A risk-based approach, where potential negative outcomes are identified and mitigated, is crucial. Continuous monitoring and evaluation of implemented solutions are also essential to ensure ongoing effectiveness and compliance. Question 3. Stakeholder feedback indicates that individuals seeking to obtain a permit for carrying a firearm in Latvia are sometimes confused about the necessary documentation. An applicant, Mr. Zidinch, is preparing his application and has spoken to a friend who obtained a permit 5 years ago. His friend mentioned a few documents but also stated that things change, so it's best to just show up and ask. Mr. Zidinch is considering submitting his application with what he remembers from his friend's advice and a general statement of purpose, hoping the authorities will guide him through any missing items. What is the most appropriate course of action for Mr. Zidinch to ensure his application for a firearm permit in Latvia is compliant? Option A. Submit the application with the documents he recalls from his friend's advice and a general statement of purpose, expecting the authorities to inform him of any deficiencies. Option B. Rely on the information provided by his friend, assuming that the core requirements for obtaining a firearm permit in Latvia have not significantly changed over the past 5 years. Option C. Thoroughly review the most current official guidelines and requirements published by the Latvian Ministry of the Interior or the relevant issuing authority for firearm permits. Option D. Visit the issuing authority in person without a fully prepared application and ask them to outline the entire process and required documents on the spot. The correct answer is C. Thoroughly review the most current official guidelines and requirements published by the Latvian Ministry of the Interior or the relevant issuing authority for firearm permits. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an applicant to navigate the specific procedural requirements for obtaining a firearm permit in Latvia, which involves understanding the nuances of the application process and the supporting documentation mandated by Latvian law. Failure to adhere strictly to these requirements can lead to delays, rejection, and potential legal complications. The applicant's reliance on outdated information highlights the importance of verifying current regulations. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves the applicant meticulously reviewing the most current official guidelines published by the Latvian Ministry of the Interior or the relevant issuing authority. This approach ensures that all required documents, such as medical certificates, psychological evaluations, proof of identity, and any specific training certificates, are up to date and meet the exact specifications outlined in the current legislation governing firearm permits in Latvia. Adhering to these official, up-to-date requirements is the only way to guarantee a compliant and successful application, as stipulated by Latvian administrative law and the law on weapons. Incorrect approaches analysis. Relying on information from a friend who obtained a permit several years ago is professionally unacceptable because it ignores the dynamic nature of legal requirements. Laws and regulations are subject to change, and outdated information can lead to submitting incomplete or incorrect documentation, directly violating the current procedural mandates for firearm permits in Latvia. Similarly, assuming that the process remains the same as it was in the past without verification demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the legal framework. Furthermore, attempting to submit an application with only a basic identification document and a vague statement of intent, without the specific supporting documents mandated by Latvian law, such as medical and psychological assessments, would be a clear failure to meet the statutory requirements for a firearm permit application. This approach bypasses essential safety and suitability checks mandated by the state. Professional reasoning. Professionals should always prioritize consulting official, current sources of information when dealing with legal and regulatory processes. This involves identifying the responsible government agency, visiting their official website, or contacting them directly to obtain the latest application forms, checklists, and legal requirements. A systematic approach, involving careful reading and understanding of all stipulated conditions, is crucial. When in doubt, seeking clarification from the issuing authority is always preferable to relying on informal or outdated advice. Question 4. Regulatory review indicates that an individual in Latvia wishes to obtain a permit for carrying a firearm. They possess a valid hunting license and have previously completed a firearm safety course. They have a general understanding of the types of firearms available, but have not yet formally applied for a permit. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure compliance with Latvian regulations for obtaining a firearm permit? Option A. Submit the hunting license and safety course certificate to the local municipality and await their approval for a general firearm permit. Option B. Contact the state police and verbally explain the intention to obtain a firearm permit, relying on their guidance without preparing specific documentation beforehand. Option C. Assume that the existing hunting license and completed safety course are sufficient for all firearm permit applications in Latvia and proceed with purchasing a firearm. Option D. Gather all legally mandated documentation, including a current medical certificate of fitness, a certificate of no criminal record, and clearly state the specific lawful purpose for firearm possession. Then submit the complete application to the state police. The correct answer is D. Gather all legally mandated documentation, including a current medical certificate of fitness, a certificate of no criminal record, and clearly state the specific lawful purpose for firearm possession. Then submit the complete application to the state police. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an individual to navigate the specific procedural requirements for obtaining a firearm permit in Latvia, balancing personal intent with legal obligations. Misinterpreting or neglecting any step can lead to legal repercussions, including denial of the permit or even criminal charges. The onus is on the applicant to demonstrate they meet all criteria and follow the prescribed process meticulously. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves diligently gathering all required documentation as stipulated by Latvian law for a firearm permit application. This includes obtaining a medical certificate confirming fitness to possess a firearm, a certificate of no criminal record, and proof of completion of a firearm safety course. Furthermore, the applicant must clearly articulate the lawful purpose for which the firearm is intended, such as sport shooting or hunting, and submit this comprehensive package to the relevant Latvian authorities, typically the state police. This approach is correct because it directly adheres to the procedural mandates outlined in the law on the circulation of weapons and ammunition in Latvia, ensuring all legal prerequisites are met before the application is even considered. It demonstrates good faith and a commitment to lawful firearm ownership. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to assume that a valid hunting license automatically suffices as proof of fitness to possess a firearm for all purposes. While a hunting license indicates eligibility for certain activities, it does not replace the specific medical and background checks mandated for a general firearm permit. This approach fails to acknowledge the distinct requirements of the firearm permit application process, potentially leading to an incomplete submission and denial. Another incorrect approach is to submit an application without clearly stating the intended lawful purpose for the firearm. Latvian law requires applicants to specify their reason for seeking a permit, such as sport shooting, hunting, or self-defense, under very specific circumstances. Omitting this crucial detail leaves the application vague and non-compliant with the law's intent to regulate firearm possession for defined, legitimate purposes. This can result in the application being rejected due to lack of clarity and adherence to legal intent. A further incorrect approach is to rely solely on a verbal declaration of intent to the authorities without providing supporting documentation. While initial inquiries might involve verbal communication, the formal application process demands written evidence. Failing to submit the required certificates and proofs, such as the medical fitness certificate or criminal record check, renders the application incomplete and non-compliant with the procedural requirements of the Latvian firearm permit system. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situations should adopt a systematic, compliance-driven decision-making process. This involves 1. Identifying the specific regulatory framework governing the activity, in this case, Latvian firearm permit laws. 2. Thoroughly researching and understanding all mandatory documentation and procedural steps. 3. Proactively gathering all required evidence and certifications. 4. Clearly articulating the lawful purpose in accordance with legal definitions. 5. Submitting a complete and accurate application package to the designated authority. 6. Maintaining records of all submissions and communications. This methodical approach minimizes risk and maximizes the likelihood of a successful and lawful outcome. Question 5. Performance analysis shows that a Latvian citizen has applied for a permit to carry a firearm, submitting an application that appears to meet most requirements, but contains a minor discrepancy in the proof of residency documentation and a missing signature on a health declaration form. The applicant is insistent on a swift approval, stating they have an urgent need for the firearm. What is the most appropriate course of action for the permit specialist to ensure compliance with Latvian firearm permit regulations? Option A. Immediately deny the permit application due to the incomplete documentation and missing signature, without further communication or opportunity for the applicant to rectify the errors. Option B. Advise the applicant on how to submit alternative, less formal proof of residency and suggest they sign the health declaration retroactively, implying these actions will expedite the process. Option C. Accept the application as is, assuming the applicant's stated urgency and verbal assurances are sufficient to overlook the minor documentation issues and the missing signature. Option D. Inform the applicant of the specific documentation deficiencies and the missing signature, clearly explaining the legal requirements for each and providing a defined period for them to submit corrected or complete documents before the application can proceed. The correct answer is D. Inform the applicant of the specific documentation deficiencies and the missing signature, clearly explaining the legal requirements for each and providing a defined period for them to submit corrected or complete documents before the application can proceed. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it involves a direct conflict between a client's stated desire and the legal requirements for obtaining a firearm permit in Latvia. The applicant's eagerness to expedite the process, coupled with their potential misrepresentation of information, creates a situation where the permit specialist must uphold legal standards while managing client expectations and potential dissatisfaction. The specialist's duty is to ensure all legal prerequisites are met, preventing the issuance of a permit to an individual who may not qualify under Latvian law, thereby safeguarding public safety and maintaining the integrity of the permit system. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves meticulously verifying all submitted documents and information against the requirements outlined in the Latvian law on weapons. This includes confirming the applicant's age, residency, mental and physical fitness, and absence of disqualifying criminal convictions. If any discrepancies or missing information are identified, the specialist must clearly communicate these deficiencies to the applicant, explaining the specific legal requirements that are not being met and outlining the necessary steps to rectify them. This approach is correct because it adheres strictly to the legal framework governing firearm permits in Latvia, ensuring that only qualified individuals receive a permit and upholding the public safety mandate of the legislation. It prioritizes legal compliance and due diligence over expediency or client pressure. Incorrect approach is analysis. An incorrect approach would be to overlook minor discrepancies or accept the applicant's verbal assurances without independent verification. This fails to meet the legal standard of due diligence required by the Latvian law on weapons and could lead to the issuance of a permit to an unqualified individual, posing a significant risk to public safety. It also undermines the authority and integrity of the permit issuing process. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately deny the permit based on the initial perceived issues without giving the applicant a clear opportunity to provide missing documentation or clarification. While adherence to law is paramount, the process typically allows for applicants to correct deficiencies. An outright denial without proper procedural steps could be seen as procedurally unfair and may not align with the spirit of the law, which often includes provisions for rectifying errors. A further incorrect approach would be to suggest or facilitate the submission of incomplete or potentially misleading information to expedite the process. This is ethically and legally unacceptable, as it constitutes complicity in misrepresentation and directly violates the principles of lawful firearm permit issuance. Such an action would have severe professional and legal consequences. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role must adopt a systematic approach. First, thoroughly understand the specific legal requirements of the Latvian law on weapons. Second, meticulously review all submitted documentation for completeness and accuracy. Third, if deficiencies are found, clearly and respectfully communicate these to the applicant, referencing the specific legal provisions. Fourth, provide the applicant with a reasonable opportunity to rectify the issues. Fifth, maintain detailed records of all communications and decisions. This structured process ensures legal compliance, fairness to the applicant, and protection of public safety. Question 6. The efficiency study reveals a backlog in processing firearm permit applications in Latvia. An applicant submits a complete set of documents, but one of the medical certificates, while still valid, was issued slightly earlier than the typical time frame considered ideal by the processing officer. The officer is under pressure to clear the backlog. What is the most appropriate course of action for the processing officer? Option A. Request a new medical certificate from the applicant, even though the current one is still legally valid, to ensure the most up-to-date information is on file. Option B. Verify the applicant's submitted documentation against the explicit requirements of the law on the circulation of weapons and ammunition and the relevant Cabinet of Ministers regulations, ensuring all statutory criteria are met before proceeding. Option C. Expedite the permit issuance by accepting the slightly older medical certificate, considering the pressure to clear the application backlog. Option D. Deny the permit application based on the processing officer's subjective assessment that the medical certificate is too old, despite it being legally valid. Correct answer is B. Verify the applicant's submitted documentation against the explicit requirements of the law on the circulation of weapons and ammunition and the relevant Cabinet of Ministers regulations, ensuring all statutory criteria are met before proceeding. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals a potential bottleneck in the Latvian firearms permit application process. A common challenge in administrative processes, especially those involving public safety and regulated items like firearms, is balancing the need for thoroughness with the demand for timely service. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an administrator to interpret and apply the law on the circulation of weapons and ammunition and related regulations in a way that is both compliant and efficient, without compromising the integrity of the permit issuance. The administrator must consider the legal requirements for permit issuance, the potential risks associated with firearms, and the rights of applicants. The best approach involves a systematic review of the applicant's submitted documentation against the explicit requirements outlined in the law on the circulation of weapons and ammunition and the Cabinet of Ministers regulations No. 1013 procedures for the issuance, renewal, and revocation of permits for carrying and owning weapons. This approach prioritizes adherence to the legal framework by verifying each piece of required information, such as proof of identity, medical fitness certificates, psychological assessments, and evidence of training, as stipulated by Latvian law. It ensures that the permit is issued only to individuals who meet all statutory criteria, thereby upholding public safety and the rule of law. This method is correct because it directly aligns with the legal mandate to ensure that only qualified individuals are granted firearm permits, minimizing risks to public safety as mandated by Latvian legislation. An incorrect approach would be to expedite the process by overlooking minor discrepancies in the submitted documents, such as a slightly outdated medical certificate that is still within a reasonable time frame. This is professionally unacceptable because it deviates from the explicit requirements of the law, potentially leading to the issuance of a permit to an individual who may no longer meet the current health standards for firearm ownership, thereby violating the public safety provisions of the law on the circulation of weapons and ammunition. Another incorrect approach would be to deny the permit solely based on the applicant's perceived nervousness during the interview, without any objective evidence of disqualification, as defined by law. This is ethically and legally flawed as it introduces subjective bias into the decision-making process, which must be based on concrete, legally defined criteria for disqualification, not on an administrator's personal interpretation of an applicant's demeanor. The law specifies grounds for refusal, and mere nervousness is not among them. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to request additional documentation that is not explicitly required by the law on the circulation of weapons and ammunition or its implementing regulations, thereby creating an undue burden on the applicant and delaying the process unnecessarily. This is a failure of professional judgment as it goes beyond the established legal framework, potentially leading to arbitrary requirements and an inefficient administrative process that does not serve the purpose of the law. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the relevant legislation and regulations. They must then systematically assess each application against these legal requirements, identifying any gaps or discrepancies. When faced with ambiguity, they should seek clarification from supervisory bodies or legal counsel rather than making assumptions or deviating from established procedures. The ultimate goal is to ensure fair, consistent, and legally compliant decision-making that upholds public safety. Question 7. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of misrepresentation regarding the intended use of a firearm by an applicant seeking a permit in Latvia. The applicant has provided a written statement detailing their intent for sport shooting. What is the most prudent course of action for the permitting authority? Option A. Conduct a thorough verification of the applicant's stated intent by cross-referencing with official sports shooting club memberships and any relevant competition records, while also ensuring all other statutory requirements of the law on weapons and ammunition of Latvia are met. Option B. Issue the permit based on the applicant's written declaration, assuming good faith and prioritizing a swift processing time. Option C. Deny the permit immediately due to the moderate risk of misrepresentation identified in the risk matrix, without further investigation. Option D. Request additional documentation from the applicant that is not explicitly required by the law on weapons and ammunition of Latvia, based on the identified risk. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough verification of the applicant's stated intent by cross-referencing with official sports shooting club memberships and any relevant competition records, while also ensuring all other statutory requirements of the law on weapons and ammunition of Latvia are met. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the applicant's stated intent for firearm ownership with the stringent requirements of Latvian firearm permit regulations. The challenge lies in discerning genuine intent from potential misrepresentation or a lack of understanding of the legal obligations, necessitating a thorough and objective assessment. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a comprehensive review of all submitted documentation, cross-referencing information provided by the applicant with any available official records or databases as permitted by Latvian law. This approach ensures that all statutory requirements for obtaining a firearm permit in Latvia are met, including verifying the applicant's eligibility, the stated purpose for firearm ownership, and the absence of any disqualifying factors as outlined in the law on weapons and ammunition of Latvia. This meticulous verification process upholds the integrity of the permitting system and ensures public safety by adhering strictly to the legal framework. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves granting the permit based solely on the applicant's written declaration of intent without independent verification. This fails to comply with the due diligence expected under Latvian firearm regulations, which mandate a thorough assessment of the applicant's suitability and the legitimacy of their stated purpose. Such an approach risks overlooking critical disqualifying factors or misrepresentation, potentially leading to the issuance of a permit to an unsuitable individual. Another incorrect approach is to deny the permit based on a vague suspicion or a minor, unsubstantiated concern raised during the interview, without concrete evidence or a clear violation of the law on weapons and ammunition of Latvia. This can lead to an arbitrary denial, which is professionally and ethically unsound, and may expose the permitting authority to legal challenges. The decision must be grounded in specific, verifiable grounds for refusal as stipulated by law. A further incorrect approach is to expedite the process by overlooking certain documentation requirements based on the applicant's perceived trustworthiness or social standing. This contravenes the principle of equal application of the law and the mandatory procedural steps outlined in Latvian firearm legislation. Such a deviation undermines the fairness and impartiality of the permitting process and creates a precedent for noncompliance. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field should employ a structured decision-making process that prioritizes adherence to the specific legal framework of Latvia, particularly the law on weapons and ammunition. This involves a systematic review of all application components, objective assessment of evidence, and a clear understanding of the grounds for approval or refusal. When faced with ambiguity, seeking clarification through official channels or consulting with legal experts within the permitting authority is crucial. The decision-making process must be transparent, justifiable, and consistently applied to all applicants. Question 8. The risk matrix shows that an applicant for a firearm permit in Latvia has submitted a valid medical certificate, but the state police have flagged a past incident that is not a criminal conviction. What is the most appropriate next step for the permit issuing authority? Option A. Request further details from the state police regarding the nature and context of the past incident to inform the suitability assessment. Option B. Approve the firearm permit application, assuming the medical certificate is sufficient and the incident was not a conviction. Option C. Approve the firearm permit application but add a specific condition related to the past incident without further investigation. Option D. Immediately deny the firearm permit application due to the flagged past incident. The correct answer is A. Request further details from the state police regarding the nature and context of the past incident to inform the suitability assessment. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it involves a direct conflict between a citizen's desire to exercise a right, carrying a firearm for self-defense, and the stringent legal requirements for obtaining and maintaining that right in Latvia. The applicant's past behavior, while not a criminal conviction, raises concerns about their suitability and adherence to the responsible firearm ownership principles mandated by Latvian law. A firearms permit application requires a thorough assessment of the applicant's character and potential risk, making a nuanced judgment essential. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves a thorough and objective review of all submitted documentation, including the applicant's medical certificate and the information provided by the state police regarding any past incidents or concerns. This approach aligns with the principles of the Latvian law on weapons and ammunition, which mandates that the permit authority assess the applicant's suitability, including their physical and mental health, and any factors that might indicate a risk to public safety. The law requires a comprehensive evaluation, not a superficial one. Therefore, requesting additional information from the state police to clarify the nature and context of the reported incident is the most responsible and legally compliant action. This ensures that the decision is based on a complete understanding of the applicant's background and potential risks, as required by the permit granting process. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately deny the permit based solely on the mention of a past incident, without further investigation. This fails to adhere to the principle of due process and the requirement for a thorough assessment. Latvian law does not automatically disqualify an applicant based on any reported incident. The nature and severity of the incident, along with its resolution, are critical factors. Another incorrect approach is to approve the permit without seeking clarification on the past incident. This disregards the potential safety implications and the responsibility of the permit authority to ensure that only suitable individuals are granted firearm permits. Overlooking potentially relevant information, even if not a criminal conviction, is a failure to exercise due diligence as mandated by the law. A further incorrect approach is to rely solely on the medical certificate and ignore the information from the state police. While a medical certificate is a crucial component, it does not encompass all aspects of an applicant's suitability. The law requires consideration of all relevant information, including reports from law enforcement agencies, to make a comprehensive assessment. Professional reasoning. Professionals in Latvia responsible for issuing firearm permits must adopt a systematic and evidence-based decision-making process. This involves 1. Verifying the completeness and accuracy of all submitted documentation. 2. Objectively assessing each piece of information against the requirements of the Latvian law on weapons and ammunition. 3. Proactively seeking clarification or additional information from relevant authorities, like the state police, when ambiguities or potential concerns arise. 4. Documenting the entire decision-making process, including the rationale for any decision made. This ensures fairness, transparency, and adherence to legal obligations, prioritizing public safety while respecting individual rights. Question 9. The control framework reveals that an individual in Riga has applied for a permit to carry a firearm for self-defense, citing a general feeling of insecurity in their neighborhood. The applicant has provided a written statement detailing their concerns, but has not offered specific evidence of threats or incidents. What is the most appropriate course of action for the Latvian permit authority? Option A. Issue the permit immediately based on the applicant's stated feeling of insecurity, as the law prioritizes the right to self-defense. Option B. Conduct a thorough investigation into the applicant's background, including criminal record checks, mental and physical health assessments, and a detailed evaluation of the credibility and specificity of their self-defense concerns, documenting all findings and the decision-making process. Option C. Deny the permit outright due to the lack of specific evidence of immediate danger, assuming general insecurity is not a sufficient legal basis. Option D. Request a sworn affidavit from 3 neighbors attesting to the applicant's character and the perceived danger in the neighborhood, and then issue the permit if the affidavits are positive. Correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough investigation into the applicant's background, including criminal record checks, mental and physical health assessments, and a detailed evaluation of the credibility and specificity of their self-defense concerns, documenting all findings and the decision-making process. Explanation. The control framework reveals a situation requiring careful navigation of Latvian firearm permit regulations. The professional challenge lies in balancing the applicant's stated need for a firearm for self-defense against the stringent requirements and potential risks associated with issuing such a permit. A thorough assessment of the applicant's background, the genuine nature of the threat, and adherence to the law on the circulation of weapons in Latvia are paramount. Misinterpreting or overlooking any aspect of the law could lead to the issuance of a permit to an unsuitable individual, jeopardizing public safety, or unfairly denying a legitimate request. The correct approach involves a comprehensive and documented investigation into the applicant's circumstances, strictly adhering to the procedures outlined in the law on the circulation of weapons. This includes verifying the applicant's identity, assessing their mental and physical fitness, confirming they have no criminal record or history of violence, and critically evaluating the credibility and specificity of the claimed self-defense need. The permit authority must meticulously document all inquiries, evidence gathered, and the rationale for their decision, ensuring full compliance with Article 12 of the Law on the Circulation of Weapons, which mandates a thorough assessment of the applicant's suitability and the necessity of the firearm. This systematic and evidence-based approach minimizes the risk of error and upholds the integrity of the permitting process. An incorrect approach would be to grant the permit based solely on the applicant's assertion of a vague threat without independent verification. This fails to meet the due diligence requirements of the law and creates an unacceptable risk. Another incorrect approach is to deny the permit summarily without conducting a thorough investigation into the applicant's background and the specifics of their claimed threat. This could be seen as an arbitrary decision and may violate the applicant's rights if they otherwise meet the legal criteria. Finally, relying on informal assurances or personal opinions rather than documented evidence and legal criteria constitutes a significant failure to adhere to the established regulatory framework. Professionals in this field must adopt a decision-making process that prioritizes objective evidence, strict adherence to legal statutes, and thorough documentation. This involves a systematic review of all submitted information, conducting necessary background checks and interviews, and critically assessing the credibility of the applicant's claims against the legal requirements for firearm permits in Latvia. Any decision must be justifiable based on the law and the evidence presented. Question 10. Strategic planning requires a thorough risk assessment for firearm permit applications in Latvia. An applicant for a firearm permit in Riga has provided documentation showing a gross annual income of Euros 25,000. Their documented monthly essential living expenses, rent, utilities, food, transportation, total Euros 1,500. The estimated annual costs for permit renewal, secure storage, and ammunition for the intended firearm are Euros 300. If the applicant's gross annual income is taxed at a rate of 23%, what is the applicant's estimated annual disposable income available for firearm-related expenses after taxes and essential living costs? Option A, Euros 5,750. Option B, Euros 19,250. Option C, Euros 15,000. Option D, Euros 3,650. The correct answer is D, Euros 3,650. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in assessing the financial viability of a firearm permit application within Latvia's regulatory framework. The applicant's financial situation directly impacts their ability to responsibly own and maintain a firearm, a key consideration for public safety and adherence to Latvian laws governing firearm permits. A thorough risk assessment requires not just a superficial review, but a deep dive into the applicant's financial stability, considering potential risks associated with financial distress. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves calculating the applicant's disposable income after essential living expenses and comparing it to the estimated annual costs associated with firearm ownership and maintenance in Latvia. This approach directly addresses the core requirement of assessing financial responsibility, as mandated by Latvian regulations concerning firearm permits. Specifically, Article 13 of the Law on Weapons and Ammunition, Irichu, Unmuniciges Aprites Likums, requires applicants to demonstrate financial stability. Calculating disposable income allows for a quantifiable assessment of whether the applicant can meet these obligations without undue financial strain, thus mitigating risks associated with irresponsible firearm ownership. The formula for disposable income would be: disposable income equals total monthly income total monthly essential expenses. The estimated annual costs for firearm ownership in Latvia can include permit renewal fees, secure storage costs, ammunition purchases, and potential insurance. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to solely rely on the applicant's stated annual income without considering their existing financial obligations. This fails to account for essential living expenses such as rent or mortgage payments, utilities, food, and transportation, which are critical for determining true financial capacity. Latvian law implicitly requires a realistic assessment of an applicant's ability to manage their finances, not just their gross income. Another incorrect approach is to focus only on the applicant's credit score without a detailed breakdown of their income and expenses. While a credit score can be an indicator of financial health, it does not provide a complete picture of an individual's ability to consistently afford the ongoing costs of firearm ownership. Latvian regulations emphasize a comprehensive assessment of financial stability, which goes beyond a single credit metric. A further incorrect approach is to estimate the annual cost of firearm ownership based on a generic average without considering the specific type of firearm the applicant intends to own and the associated maintenance requirements. Different firearms have varying costs for ammunition, cleaning supplies, and potential repairs. A responsible assessment must be tailored to the applicant's specific circumstances and intended use, as implied by the need for a permit for a particular weapon. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic approach to risk assessment for firearm permit applications. This involves: 1. Understanding the specific legal requirements of the jurisdiction, Latvia in this case, particularly concerning financial stability as outlined in the Law on Weapons and Ammunition. 2. Gathering all relevant financial documentation from the applicant, including proof of income and detailed expense statements. 3. Performing a quantitative analysis, such as calculating disposable income, to objectively assess financial capacity. 4. Considering qualitative factors, such as the applicant's history of financial responsibility. 5. Documenting the entire assessment process and the rationale for the decision. This structured approach ensures compliance with regulations, promotes public safety, and upholds professional integrity. Question 11. Cost-benefit analysis shows that while processing firearm permit applications in Latvia involves administrative costs, the societal benefit of ensuring responsible firearm ownership and public safety is paramount. Considering this, what is the most appropriate approach when reviewing an application from an individual with a history of minor offenses who claims the firearm is for self-defense? Option A. Rely exclusively on the testimonials provided by the applicant's personal references to determine their suitability for firearm ownership. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment, meticulously reviewing the applicant's criminal record, mental health evaluations, and the specific justification for the permit, in accordance with the Latvian Law on Weapons and Ammunition. Option C. Automatically deny the permit due to the presence of any past minor offenses, irrespective of their nature or how long ago they occurred. Option D. Grant the permit immediately based on the applicant's stated need for self-defense, assuming that the desire for protection outweighs any potential risks. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment, meticulously reviewing the applicant's criminal record, mental health evaluations, and the specific justification for the permit, in accordance with the Latvian Law on Weapons and Ammunition. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the applicant's stated need for a firearm for self-defense against the stringent requirements and potential risks associated with firearm permits in Latvia. The applicant's history of minor offenses, while not disqualifying per se, necessitates a thorough and objective risk assessment to ensure public safety and compliance with Latvian firearms legislation. A superficial review could lead to either an unwarranted denial or an inappropriate approval, both carrying significant consequences. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a comprehensive risk assessment that meticulously reviews all provided documentation, including the applicant's criminal record, mental health evaluations, and the specific justification for the firearm permit. This approach aligns with the principles of responsible firearm regulation in Latvia, which prioritize public safety by ensuring that only individuals who pose no undue risk are granted permits. The Latvian law on weapons and ammunition, Ieroču un municīgas aprits likums, mandates a thorough examination of an applicant's suitability, including their criminal history and any factors that might indicate a propensity for misuse. This detailed review ensures that the decision is based on objective criteria and a holistic understanding of the applicant's profile, thereby upholding the law and public trust. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to grant the permit solely based on the applicant's assertion of self-defense needs without a thorough investigation into their past. This fails to comply with the Latvian law on weapons and ammunition, which requires more than just a stated need. It demands an assessment of the applicant's overall suitability and potential risk. This approach disregards the regulatory framework's emphasis on preventing firearms from falling into the wrong hands. Another incorrect approach is to automatically deny the permit due to the applicant's past minor offenses, regardless of their nature or recency. Latvian law generally allows for discretion in such cases, considering the severity and context of the offenses. An automatic denial without a nuanced assessment of the individual's rehabilitation and current circumstances would be an overreach and potentially discriminatory, failing to adhere to the principle of individualized assessment mandated by the spirit of the law. A third incorrect approach is to rely solely on the opinion of the applicant's references without independently verifying the information or conducting a background check. While references can provide valuable insights, they are not a substitute for the official checks and evaluations required by Latvian firearms legislation. This approach introduces an unacceptable level of subjectivity and potential for bias, undermining the integrity of the permit issuance process. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field should adopt a systematic and evidence-based decision-making process. This involves 1. Understanding the specific legal requirements of the Latvian law on weapons and ammunition. 2. Gathering all relevant documentation from the applicant and official sources. 3. Conducting a thorough and objective risk assessment, considering all aspects of the applicant's profile. 4. Documenting the entire process and the rationale for the final decision. 5. Seeking guidance from supervisors or legal counsel when faced with complex or ambiguous cases. This structured approach ensures fairness, compliance, and the protection of public safety. Question 12. Operational review demonstrates that an applicant for a firearm permit in Latvia has submitted all standard documentation, including a medical certificate confirming their physical and mental fitness. However, during the interview, the applicant expresses a vague desire to protect their property without providing specific details about any credible threats. What is the most appropriate course of action for the issuing authority to take? Option A. Request a psychological evaluation from a specialist, even though the initial medical certificate indicates no issues, due to the applicant's somewhat unclear articulation of their intentions. Option B. Issue the permit immediately, as all submitted documentation appears to be in order and the applicant's stated purpose, while vague, is not explicitly prohibited. Option C. Deny the permit based on the vagueness of the applicant's stated purpose, assuming a lack of specific threat indicates potential for misuse or an inability to articulate responsible firearm ownership. Option D. Conduct a more in-depth interview to clarify the applicant's specific concerns and assess the credibility of any perceived threats, while also verifying their understanding of safe firearm handling and storage requirements as per Latvian law. The correct answer is D. Conduct a more in-depth interview to clarify the applicant's specific concerns and assess the credibility of any perceived threats, while also verifying their understanding of safe firearm handling and storage requirements as per Latvian law. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the applicant's stated intent for firearm ownership against the inherent risks associated with such possession. The Latvian firearms legislation, specifically the law on the circulation of weapons, places a significant onus on the issuing authority to conduct a thorough risk assessment. This involves not just verifying documentation, but also evaluating the applicant's suitability, which includes their mental and physical health, as well as their past behavior and potential for misuse. A superficial review could lead to the issuance of a permit to an individual who poses a risk to themselves or others, while an overly stringent or biased assessment could unfairly deny a lawful applicant their rights. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a comprehensive risk assessment that meticulously examines all aspects of the applicant's profile, as mandated by Latvian law. This includes a thorough review of medical certificates confirming mental and physical fitness, verification of the applicant's criminal record and any history of violence or substance abuse, and an evaluation of their stated purpose for acquiring the firearm. Furthermore, it necessitates an interview to gauge the applicant's understanding of safe firearm handling, storage, and the legal responsibilities associated with ownership. This holistic approach ensures that the decision to grant or deny a permit is based on a well-informed evaluation of potential risks, aligning with the law on the circulation of weapons objective of public safety. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves solely relying on the submitted documentation without further investigation or personal assessment. This fails to meet the legal requirement for a diligent risk assessment, as it ignores potential red flags that might only become apparent through an interview or background checks beyond what is provided. Risks overlooking crucial information regarding the applicant's suitability and could lead to the issuance of a permit to an unsuitable individual. Another incorrect approach is to deny the permit based on unsubstantiated assumptions or personal biases about the applicant's background or perceived lifestyle, without concrete evidence of unsuitability as defined by law. This violates the principle of fair and objective assessment and could lead to a wrongful denial, infringing upon the applicant's legal rights. The law on the circulation of weapons requires objective criteria for denial, not subjective prejudice. A third incorrect approach is to expedite the process by approving the permit based on a cursory review, prioritizing administrative efficiency over thoroughness. This approach neglects the critical public safety aspect of firearm permit issuance. Potential consequences of a firearm falling into the wrong hands are severe, and a rushed assessment directly contravenes the spirit and letter of the law, which mandates careful consideration of all risk factors. Professional reasoning. Professionals tasked with evaluating firearm permit applications in Latvia must adopt a structured decision-making process. This begins with a complete understanding of the law on the circulation of weapons and its implementing regulations. The process should involve a systematic collection and verification of all required documentation, followed by a structured interview designed to assess the applicant's knowledge, intent, and overall suitability. Any concerns arising from the documentation or interview should trigger further investigation, such as consulting with relevant authorities or requesting additional medical evaluations. The final decision must be clearly documented, with a rationale that directly addresses the risk assessment findings and their alignment with legal requirements. This methodical approach ensures fairness, transparency, and adherence to public safety mandates. Question 13. The monitoring system demonstrates an anomaly in the processing of a firearm permit application in Latvia, where the applicant's provided documentation appears superficially complete, but a background check flagged a minor, non-violent offense from over a decade ago. The applicant has also expressed a strong, albeit lawful, interest in competitive shooting. How should the permit-issuing authority proceed to ensure a thorough and legally compliant risk assessment? Option A. Deny the permit based on the flagged past offense, regardless of its nature or age, as any criminal record automatically disqualifies an applicant. Option B. Issue the permit immediately, as the past offense is minor and occurred a significant time ago, and the applicant's interest in competitive shooting is a lawful purpose. Option C. Forward the application to a higher authority for review without conducting any further investigation, assuming the flagged offense is sufficient grounds for concern. Option D. Conduct a detailed interview with the applicant to explore the circumstances of the past offense, their current stability, and the specifics of their competitive shooting aspirations, while also verifying the nature and resolution of the past offense through official channels. The correct answer is D. Conduct a detailed interview with the applicant to explore the circumstances of the past offense, their current stability, and the specifics of their competitive shooting aspirations, while also verifying the nature and resolution of the past offense through official channels. Explanation: the monitoring system demonstrates a potential lapse in the risk assessment process for firearm permit applications in Latvia. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a nuanced understanding of Latvian firearms legislation, specifically the law on weapons and ammunition, and its associated regulations concerning the assessment of an applicant's suitability and the potential risks they may pose. A thorough risk assessment is paramount to public safety and the responsible issuance of firearm permits. The best professional approach involves a comprehensive review of all submitted documentation, cross-referencing information with relevant databases, and conducting a thorough interview with the applicant to assess their mental state, any history of violence or substance abuse, and their stated purpose for acquiring a firearm. This approach aligns with the principles of due diligence mandated by Latvian law, which requires authorities to verify that an applicant meets all legal requirements and does not pose a threat to public order or personal safety. The law emphasizes a proactive assessment of risk, not merely a passive check of basic criteria. An incorrect approach would be to solely rely on the applicant's self-declaration regarding their mental health and absence of criminal convictions, without independent verification. This fails to meet the legal obligation to conduct a robust risk assessment and could allow individuals who pose a risk to obtain a firearm. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize speed of processing over the thoroughness of the risk assessment, thereby potentially overlooking critical red flags. This demonstrates a disregard for public safety and a failure to adhere to the spirit and letter of Latvian firearms legislation. Finally, an approach that focuses only on the applicant's stated intent for the firearm, without evaluating their overall suitability and potential for misuse, is also professionally unacceptable. The law requires a holistic evaluation of the applicant's character and circumstances. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the legal requirements for firearm permits in Latvia. This framework should include a systematic process for gathering and verifying information, identifying potential risks, and making a reasoned decision based on the evidence. It necessitates a commitment to public safety, ethical conduct, and adherence to regulatory mandates. Question 14. System analysis indicates that an applicant for a firearm permit in Latvia has a history of 2 minor convictions for public order disturbances occurring over 5 years ago. The applicant states they require the firearm for personal self-defense due to perceived threats in their neighborhood. Considering the firearms law of Latvia, which approach best balances the applicant's stated need with public safety considerations? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment, thoroughly reviewing the nature and recency of the convictions alongside the applicant's stated need for self-defense to determine overall suitability. Option B. Grant the permit immediately based on the applicant's assertion of self-defense needs, as the convictions are minor and historical. Option C. Issue the permit but impose strict conditions, such as mandatory storage requirements, without a detailed review of the conviction's relevance to current risk. Option D. Automatically deny the permit due to the applicant's past convictions, regardless of their nature or age. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment, thoroughly reviewing the nature and recency of the convictions alongside the applicant's stated need for self-defense to determine overall suitability. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the applicant's stated need for self-defense with the stringent requirements for firearm permits in Latvia. The applicant's history of minor offenses, while not disqualifying on their face, necessitates a thorough risk assessment to ensure public safety and compliance with the firearms law of Latvia. The challenge lies in interpreting the spirit and letter of the law, which prioritizes safety and responsible ownership, against an individual's subjective claim of necessity. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment that meticulously reviews the applicant's criminal record, considering the nature, recency, and severity of the offenses in conjunction with the stated reason for the permit. This approach aligns with the principles of the Firearms Law of Latvia, which mandates that permits are granted only to individuals who are not a danger to public order or safety. The law requires authorities to assess the applicant's suitability, which implicitly includes evaluating past behavior as an indicator of future responsibility. A thorough review ensures that the decision is evidence-based and adheres to the precautionary principle inherent in firearm regulation. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to grant the permit solely based on the applicant's assertion of needing a firearm for self-defense, without a detailed examination of their past conduct. This fails to uphold the regulatory requirement to assess the applicant's suitability and potential risk. It bypasses the due diligence mandated by the Firearms Law of Latvia, which is designed to prevent firearms from falling into the hands of individuals who may pose a threat. Another incorrect approach would be to automatically deny the permit based on any past minor offense, regardless of its nature or how long ago it occurred. This is overly punitive and does not reflect the nuanced risk assessment required by Latvian law. The law does not prescribe automatic disqualification for all minor offenses. Rather, it calls for an evaluation of the overall suitability of the applicant. Such an automatic denial would be arbitrary and fail to consider mitigating factors or the passage of time. A further incorrect approach would be to rely solely on the applicant's self-reported change in behavior without independent verification or a thorough review of their record. While personal growth is important, regulatory decisions must be grounded in objective evidence and a comprehensive understanding of the applicant's history, as per the Firearms Law of Latvia. This approach would be susceptible to misrepresentation and would not fulfill the duty to protect public safety. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field must adopt a systematic and evidence-based decision-making process. This involves 1. Understanding the specific legal framework Firearms Law of Latvia. 2. Gathering all relevant information, including criminal records, personal statements, and any other supporting documentation. 3. Conducting a thorough risk assessment that weighs the applicant's stated needs against their history and the potential risks to public safety. 4. Applying the legal criteria objectively and consistently. 5. Documenting the decision-making process and the rationale behind it. This structured approach ensures fairness, compliance, and the prioritization of public safety. Question 15. Implementation of a robust risk assessment process for a firearm permit application in Latvia requires careful consideration of various factors. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the requirements of the Latvian law on weapons and ensures a thorough evaluation of potential risks? Option A. Relying on the applicant's verbal assurances of responsible behavior and a brief overview of their intended firearm use. Option B. Conducting a detailed, documented assessment of the applicant's personal circumstances, proposed firearm storage methods, and intended use, cross-referenced with established safety protocols and legal obligations under Latvian law. Option C. Performing a quick review of the application form and supporting documents, prioritizing efficiency over in-depth risk analysis. Option D. Focusing primarily on the applicant's stated reason for wanting a firearm, assuming that a legitimate purpose negates significant risks. The correct answer is B. Conducting a detailed, documented assessment of the applicant's personal circumstances, proposed firearm storage methods, and intended use, cross-referenced with established safety protocols and legal obligations under Latvian law. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the applicant to navigate the Latvian legal framework for firearm permits while also demonstrating a thorough understanding of the risk assessment process. The challenge lies in accurately identifying and mitigating potential risks associated with firearm ownership, which directly impacts public safety and the applicant's eligibility. A superficial or incomplete risk assessment could lead to the denial of a permit or, worse, contribute to future safety incidents. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves a comprehensive and documented assessment of all potential risks associated with the applicant's intended firearm use and storage, directly referencing the requirements outlined in the Latvian law on weapons. This includes evaluating the applicant's personal circumstances, the proposed storage methods, and the specific types of firearms intended for possession, all in relation to established safety protocols and legal obligations. The justification for this approach lies in its adherence to the spirit and letter of the Latvian law on weapons, which mandates a thorough evaluation of an applicant's suitability and the associated risks to public safety. A documented, detailed risk assessment demonstrates due diligence and provides a clear basis for the decision-making authority. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to focus solely on the applicant's stated intention for firearm ownership without a detailed examination of potential risks. This fails to meet the proactive risk assessment requirements mandated by the Latvian law on weapons, which expects a thorough evaluation beyond mere declarations. Another incorrect approach is to rely on informal assurances or anecdotal evidence regarding the applicant's responsibility, as this lacks the objective, documented evidence required for a legally sound decision and bypasses the structured risk assessment process. Finally, an approach that prioritizes speed and convenience over thoroughness, such as a cursory review of documents without a detailed risk analysis, directly contravenes the legal obligation to ensure public safety and the responsible ownership of firearms. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic and evidence-based approach to risk assessment for firearm permit applications. This involves understanding the specific legal requirements of the Latvian law on weapons, identifying all relevant risk factors, personal, environmental, and operational, and documenting the assessment process meticulously. When faced with ambiguity or incomplete information, professionals should seek clarification and further evidence rather than making assumptions. The ultimate goal is to balance the applicant's rights with the paramount need for public safety, ensuring that all decisions are justifiable and legally compliant. Question 16. To address the challenge of assessing an applicant's suitability for a firearm permit in Latvia, what is the most professionally sound and legally compliant approach to conducting the required risk assessment? Option A. Expedite the permit process by conducting a brief review of the application, prioritizing the applicant's convenience and minimizing the time spent on the risk assessment. Option B. Focus primarily on the applicant's stated purpose for acquiring the firearm, assuming responsible intent unless there is explicit evidence to the contrary. Option C. Rely heavily on the applicant's personal assurances of their responsible behavior and commitment to firearm safety, as this demonstrates their character. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that meticulously examines the applicant's mental and physical health, criminal history, substance abuse history, and stated purpose for firearm acquisition, ensuring all evaluations are objective and evidence-based according to Latvian law. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that meticulously examines the applicant's mental and physical health, criminal history, substance abuse history, and stated purpose for firearm acquisition, ensuring all evaluations are objective and evidence-based according to Latvian law. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the applicant's stated intent for firearm ownership against the inherent risks associated with such ownership, as mandated by Latvian law. The challenge lies in accurately assessing the applicant's risk profile without resorting to subjective bias or overlooking critical legal requirements. A thorough risk assessment is paramount to upholding public safety while respecting individual rights. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a comprehensive risk assessment that meticulously examines all aspects of the applicant's background, as stipulated by the law on the circulation of weapons in Latvia. This includes a thorough review of the applicant's mental and physical health, any history of criminal activity or substance abuse, and their stated purpose for acquiring the firearm. The assessment must be objective, evidence-based, and directly aligned with the criteria outlined in the law for permit issuance. This approach ensures that decisions are grounded in legal requirements and a prudent evaluation of potential risks, thereby safeguarding public safety. Incorrect approach is analysis, focusing solely on the applicant's stated purpose for acquiring the firearm without a comprehensive background check, is a significant regulatory failure. Latvian law requires a holistic assessment, not just a superficial review of intent. This approach neglects potential underlying risks that may not be apparent from the stated purpose alone. Relying primarily on the applicant's personal assurances of responsible behavior without independent verification or objective assessment constitutes an ethical and regulatory lapse. Personal assurances are part of the application. They cannot substitute for the legally mandated due diligence and risk evaluation processes. This approach is susceptible to manipulation, and fails to meet the stringent requirements for public safety. Prioritizing the applicant's convenience and expediting the permit process by minimizing the depth of the risk assessment is a direct contravention of the law on the circulation of weapons. The law emphasizes a rigorous evaluation to prevent firearms from falling into the wrong hands. Expediency cannot override the legal obligation to conduct a thorough and diligent risk assessment. Professional reasoning. Professionals tasked with firearm permit applications in Latvia must adopt a systematic and legally compliant risk assessment framework. This involves understanding the specific provisions of the law on the circulation of weapons, which dictates the scope and depth of the required assessment. The process should begin with gathering all necessary documentation, followed by objective verification of information, including health records, criminal history, and any other relevant data. A structured interview can supplement this, but it should not be the sole basis for decision-making. The ultimate goal is to make an informed decision that upholds public safety by identifying and mitigating potential risks in strict adherence to Latvian legal mandates. Question 17. The review process indicates an applicant for a firearm permit in Latvia has a history of several minor public order offenses from several years ago. Considering the Latvian law on the circulation of weapons and ammunition, what is the most appropriate course of action for the permit-issuing authority? Option A. Automatically deny the permit application due to the presence of any public order offenses, irrespective of their severity or age. Option B. Grant the permit without further investigation, assuming that past minor infractions are not relevant to current firearm possession. Option C. Conduct a detailed, individualized risk assessment, examining the nature, recency, and circumstances of each offense in conjunction with the specific grounds for refusal outlined in the law on the circulation of weapons and ammunition. Option D. Rely on informal discussions with law enforcement officers to gauge the applicant's suitability, without a formal review of the offenses against the legal criteria. The correct answer is C. Conduct a detailed, individualized risk assessment, examining the nature, recency, and circumstances of each offense in conjunction with the specific grounds for refusal outlined in the law on the circulation of weapons and ammunition. Explanation. The review process indicates a potential applicant for a firearm permit in Latvia has a history of minor public order offenses. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the applicant's right to potentially possess a firearm with the state's obligation to ensure public safety. The decision-maker must carefully assess the nature and recency of the offenses against the criteria outlined in Latvian firearms legislation, specifically the law on the circulation of weapons and ammunition Iriču Aprīts likums. A rigid, automatic denial without considering the specifics of the offenses would be unprofessional and potentially unlawful. The best approach involves a thorough, individualized risk assessment. This means meticulously examining the details of each public order offense, including the date, severity, and any mitigating circumstances. The assessment must then be weighed against the specific prohibitions and discretionary grounds for refusal outlined in the law on the circulation of weapons and ammunition. For instance, Article 15 of the law lists grounds for refusal, and a nuanced interpretation is required to determine if the applicant's past conduct truly poses a significant risk to public safety or constitutes a disqualifying factor under the law. This approach upholds both the applicant's rights and the public interest by ensuring decisions are evidence-based and legally compliant. An incorrect approach would be to automatically deny the permit based solely on the existence of any public order offense, regardless of its nature or age. This fails to adhere to the principle of proportionality and the specific provisions of the law on the circulation of weapons and ammunition, which often allow for discretion based on the totality of circumstances. Another incorrect approach would be to grant the permit without any further investigation into the offenses, assuming that past minor infractions are irrelevant. This disregards the fundamental duty to assess risk and ensure public safety, potentially violating the spirit and letter of the law. Finally, relying on informal advice or personal opinion rather than the established legal framework for assessing firearm permit applications would be a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Professionals in this field should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with a comprehensive review of the applicant's submitted documentation. This should be followed by a diligent investigation into any disclosed or discoverable information, such as past offenses. The findings must then be systematically compared against the explicit criteria and grounds for refusal or granting stipulated in the law on the circulation of weapons and ammunition. Documentation of the entire assessment process, including the rationale for the final decision, is crucial for accountability and transparency. Question 18. Examination of the data shows that an individual in Latvia is applying for a permit to carry a firearm. They have a history of minor altercations in their youth that did not result in criminal charges, and they have experienced periods of significant personal stress in recent years. Considering the Latvian law on weapons, which approach best reflects a responsible and compliant risk assessment for this applicant? Option A. Minimize or omit any mention of past altercations and periods of personal stress, assuming that the absence of criminal charges makes them irrelevant. Option B. Assume that only current mental health diagnoses are relevant, and that past stress or minor altercations are not pertinent to the risk assessment for a firearm permit. Option C. Honestly and thoroughly disclose all past altercations and periods of personal stress to the issuing authority, acknowledging their potential relevance to responsible firearm ownership. Option D. Focus solely on gathering the required official documentation, and assume that personal history not leading to formal charges is not a concern for the permit. Correct answer is C. Honestly and thoroughly disclose all past altercations and periods of personal stress to the issuing authority, acknowledging their potential relevance to responsible firearm ownership. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual seeking a firearm permit in Latvia to navigate the regulatory framework concerning risk assessment, specifically focusing on potential misuse or threats. The challenge lies in accurately and ethically evaluating personal circumstances against the legal requirements for firearm ownership, ensuring public safety without unfairly infringing on individual rights. The applicant must demonstrate a clear understanding of the responsibilities associated with firearm possession and the potential risks involved. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough and honest self-assessment of any factors that could be construed as a risk, as mandated by Latvian firearm permit regulations. This includes proactively identifying and disclosing any history of violence, mental health concerns, or substance abuse that might be relevant to the applicant's suitability for firearm ownership. Such an approach aligns with the core principle of public safety embedded in the law on weapons of Latvia, which requires applicants to demonstrate they are not a danger to themselves or others. By openly addressing potential risks, the applicant facilitates a transparent and compliant application process, allowing the issuing authority to make an informed decision based on comprehensive information. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves minimizing or omitting any personal history that could be perceived as a risk, such as past altercations or periods of significant stress, under the belief that such information is irrelevant or will not be discovered. This failure directly contravenes the spirit and letter of Latvian firearm legislation, which emphasizes the applicant's responsibility to provide truthful and complete information. Concealing relevant information constitutes a misrepresentation, potentially leading to permit denial or revocation and legal repercussions. Another incorrect approach is to assume that a lack of formal criminal charges negates any potential risk. Latvian regulations consider a broader spectrum of factors beyond just criminal convictions when assessing suitability for a firearm permit. Personal history, behavioral patterns, and documented instances of aggression or instability, even without a formal conviction, can be grounds for concern and must be disclosed. This approach overlooks the proactive risk assessment required by the authorities. A further incorrect approach is to focus solely on the legal requirements for documentation without considering the underlying intent of the law, which is to ensure responsible firearm ownership. This might involve gathering all the required paperwork, but failing to reflect on personal circumstances that, while not explicitly listed as disqualifiers, might still raise concerns about judgment or temperament. The law expects a holistic understanding of the responsibilities and risks involved, not just a checklist completion. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should adopt a framework of proactive transparency and comprehensive self-disclosure. This involves understanding that the Latvian firearm permit application process is not merely administrative but a risk management exercise. Applicants should critically evaluate their personal history, mental state, and lifestyle against the overarching goal of public safety. If any doubt exists about the potential relevance of a personal circumstance, it is always safer and more ethically sound to disclose it. This approach fosters trust with the authorities and demonstrates a commitment to responsible firearm ownership, ultimately increasing the likelihood of a successful and lawful permit acquisition. Question 19. Upon reviewing an application for a firearm permit in Latvia, what is the most effective approach for the applicant to demonstrate a comprehensive understanding of risk assessment as required by the Latvian firearms law? Option A. Detail-specific, legally compliant storage and handling procedures tailored to the firearm type and intended use, alongside a plan for ongoing training and adherence to all Latvian regulations regarding firearm safety and transportation. Option B. Provide a generalized statement about firearm safety, including common precautions, without specific reference to the applicant's circumstances or Latvian legal requirements for storage and transport. Option C. Assert that a thorough risk assessment is redundant given the applicant's intention to keep the firearm unloaded and secured, without elaborating on the specific security measures or other potential risks. Option D. Emphasize the applicant's unblemished criminal history as evidence that no significant risks are present, thereby minimizing the need for extensive risk mitigation strategies. The correct answer is A. Detail-specific, legally compliant storage and handling procedures tailored to the firearm type and intended use, alongside a plan for ongoing training and adherence to all Latvian regulations regarding firearm safety and transportation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the applicant to navigate the Latvian legal framework for firearm permits while also demonstrating a thorough understanding of risk assessment principles. The challenge lies in accurately identifying and articulating potential risks associated with firearm ownership and proposing appropriate mitigation strategies, all within the specific context of Latvian regulations. A superficial understanding of risk assessment or a failure to align it with the legal requirements could lead to a denial of the permit. Correct approach analysis. The best approach involves a comprehensive assessment of potential risks associated with firearm ownership, directly linked to the applicant's stated purpose for the firearm and their personal circumstances, and then proposing specific, legally compliant mitigation measures. This aligns with the spirit and letter of Latvian firearm permit regulations, which require applicants to demonstrate responsible ownership and the ability to prevent misuse. By detailing how the applicant will store the firearm securely, undergo regular training, and adhere to all legal storage and transportation requirements, the applicant proactively addresses the concerns of the permitting authority and demonstrates a commitment to safety and compliance. This approach shows a deep understanding of the regulatory intent behind the risk assessment requirement. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves focusing solely on the applicant's clean criminal record and assuming this negates any need for further risk assessment. While a clean record is a prerequisite, Latvian law requires a proactive demonstration of risk management beyond just the absence of past offenses. This approach fails to address potential future risks or the applicant's ongoing responsibilities. Another incorrect approach is to provide a generic list of safety precautions without tailoring them to the specific type of firearm, the applicant's intended use, or the relevant Latvian storage and transportation laws. This demonstrates a lack of specific knowledge and a failure to engage with the nuanced requirements of the permit application process. It suggests a superficial understanding of risk mitigation. A third incorrect approach is to argue that risk assessment is unnecessary as the firearm will be kept unloaded and locked away, without providing details on the specific security measures or acknowledging other potential risks such as theft or accidental discharge during handling. This approach is insufficient because it does not comprehensively cover all potential risks or demonstrate adherence to the detailed requirements for secure storage and handling mandated by Latvian law. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach firearm permit applications by first thoroughly understanding the specific legal requirements of the jurisdiction, in this case, Latvia. This involves identifying all mandated documentation and assessment criteria. For risk assessment, the process should be iterative. Identify potential risks based on the applicant's profile and intended use, then propose concrete, legally compliant mitigation strategies. This should be followed by a review to ensure all proposed measures directly address the identified risks and satisfy regulatory expectations. Documenting this process clearly and comprehensively is crucial for a successful application. Question 20. When evaluating a Latvian applicant's financial capacity for a firearms permit, which of the following methods provides the most robust assessment of their ability to responsibly manage the financial obligations associated with firearm ownership? Option A. Assessing the applicant's total net worth, defined as total assets minus total liabilities, to determine their overall financial standing. Option B. Reviewing the applicant's credit score as the primary indicator of their financial responsibility. Option C. Calculating the applicant's debt-to-income ratio, DTI, by dividing their total monthly debt payments by their gross monthly income and comparing this to a predefined risk threshold. Option D. Evaluating the number of dependents the applicant has, as this directly impacts household financial stability. The correct answer is C. Calculating the applicant's debt-to-income ratio, DTI, by dividing their total monthly debt payments by their gross monthly income and comparing this to a predefined risk threshold. Explanation. The scenario presents a professional challenge in assessing the financial viability of a firearms permit applicant in Latvia, requiring a nuanced understanding of risk assessment principles as applied to regulatory compliance. The core difficulty lies in translating abstract risk factors into quantifiable financial metrics that directly inform the permit-granting authority's decision, balancing public safety with individual rights. The correct approach involves a comprehensive financial risk assessment that quantifies the likelihood and potential impact of financial instability on the applicant's ability to safely and responsibly possess a firearm. This includes analyzing the applicant's income stability, debt levels, and any history of financial distress that could compromise their judgment or ability to maintain the firearm. Specifically, under Latvian regulations concerning firearms permits, the applicant must demonstrate financial capacity to ensure the safe storage and maintenance of the firearm and to cover potential liabilities. A key metric would be the debt-to-income ratio, DTI, which directly reflects the applicant's ability to manage financial obligations. A DTI below a certain threshold, for instance, would indicate a lower risk of financial strain leading to irresponsible firearm ownership. The calculation would involve summing all monthly debt payments, including potential loan repayments for firearm-related expenses, if applicable, and dividing by the gross monthly income. For example, if an applicant has monthly debt payments totaling euros 500 and a gross monthly income of euros 2,000, their DTI would be /frac 500 2000 equals 0, 25 or 25%. A DTI of 25% would generally be considered manageable, suggesting a lower financial risk. An incorrect approach would be to solely rely on the applicant's declared net worth without considering their liquidity or ongoing financial obligations. Net worth, while a measure of assets minus liabilities, does not adequately reflect the immediate ability to meet recurring expenses or manage unexpected financial shocks, which are critical for responsible firearm ownership. For instance, an applicant might have significant assets tied up in illiquid investments, making them vulnerable to financial distress if immediate cash is required. Another incorrect approach would be to focus exclusively on the applicant's credit score without a deeper analysis of the underlying financial behaviors. A credit score is a snapshot and may not reveal the full picture of financial stability, such as the presence of significant but manageable debt, or a recent but resolved period of financial difficulty. Latvian authorities require a more holistic view of financial responsibility than a single credit score can provide. A further incorrect approach would be to use a simplified risk score based on a single factor, such as the number of dependents, without any financial quantification. While dependents can impact household finances, their presence alone does not directly indicate financial risk in the context of firearm ownership, without a corresponding financial analysis of income and expenses. The professional decision-making process for such situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This framework should begin with identifying all relevant risk factors, financial, personal, and behavioral, quantifying these factors where possible using established metrics, like DTI, liquidity ratios, and then evaluating the overall risk profile against the specific requirements of Latvian firearms legislation. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are evidence-based, consistent, and defensible, prioritizing public safety while adhering to legal and ethical standards.